Good luck.
All the best.
Welcome, everyone, to this intercultural webinar series. This is our inaugural webinar on exploring intercultural competence from African perspectives. My name is Darla Deerdorf, and I'm the chair holder of this UNESCO chair, and I'm joined today by the UNESCO chair team at Stellenbosch University. On the next slide, just a moment. And as I'm introducing the webinar, we invite you to introduce yourself in chat and where you are calling in from. We have people from all over the world today, and we are delighted that you are able to join us. So here you will see our UNESCO core team of this chair. So we have two co-chairs, and I'm so delighted that you'll get to hear today from one of our co-chairs, Dr. Precious Simba. We also have a co-chair of Dr. Davinia Jitu, who is based at Durban University of Technology, also in South Africa. And then we have Wim de Wit, Rabia, Omar, Yansiwi Mugisa, and Sarah Richmond. And so we are delighted to have this core team actively working on the mandates of our UNESCO chair, which are both in research and in practice. And research, we are looking at the intersections of intercultural competence in three key areas: peace building, gender, and climate action. And if you would like to be involved or join the work of the chair, you have our contact information here on this slide, UNESCO-ICC@sun.ac.za. And also you'll see our chair website. We invite you to sign up for our quarterly newsletter so you can learn more about the work of our chair. And on the next slide, we have a brief bit about our capacity building mandate. One of the main ways in which we are working on developing capacity is through UNESCO Story Circles, which is available in an open access manual on developing intercultural competences in 7 different languages. And you can see here a brief description about UNESCO Story Circles. And we're excited to be able to take this out across South Africa, across the continent, and even globally. In fact, I will be in headquarters of UNESCO next week doing the Story Circles facilitation there with colleagues from different countries. Okay, so on the next slide, we have some invitations for you. One of our partners to the UNESCO chair is the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence, which is a global nonprofit with over 5,000 colleagues from around the world, including students, practitioners, researchers, and policymakers. And it's free to join. And you see the instructions here on how you can join the World Council and become involved in one or more of the 20+ working groups, including a working group on ICC in Africa. So we hope many of you will choose to join and become involved in that way as well. And we have some upcoming events for you. The World Council has a virtual global meetup coming up on the 5th of March. Our very next UNESCO Chair webinar, which, by the way, these are monthly. So our next UNESCO Chair webinar will be on the 26th of March and featuring a youth ambassador, John Linus from Kenya, sharing youth perspectives, African youth perspectives on intercultural competence. The World Council is having a virtual global forum on the 22nd through 24th of April, featuring a keynote from the former Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova, along with some other keynote speakers. So we hope that you all will join us for the Global Forum, and especially to join us in person. Every year, this chair organizes an in-person intercultural conference. Our inaugural conference was in Nairobi this past year in October, and we are excited to be in Rabat, Morocco on the end of September, September 29th through October 2. And our call for proposals will be coming out soon. So we hope that many of you will propose sessions for this conference and join us in person in Rabat later this year. All right, so now for the main feature of today's inaugural webinar. As I mentioned, we are so thrilled to have one of our co-chairs of this UNESCO chair who's based at Stellenbosch University, Dr. Precious Simba. And she will be sharing with us about some of her research and work, and including from a recent book that she is just launching very soon. So we want to welcome Dr. Simba to today's inaugural webinar. She is a teacher and researcher in the Faculty of Education at Stellenbosch University, along with being a co-chair. Her research expertise lies at the intersection of Ubuntu in education, feminist theory, and inclusive and citizenship education, with a particular focus on the potential of Ubuntu to create inclusive and transformative education experiences. Dr. Simba received the prestigious Mandela Scholarship Award at the University of Sussex in 2013 and 14, and was the Solplaatje Scholar at Stellenbosch University 2018 to 2021. And her most recent publication is a co-authored book, Academic Xenophobia, African Scholars in South African Universities, which critically examines the experiences of African academics navigating institutional exclusion and epistemic hierarchies in South African higher education. We are so thrilled and honored to have with us today Dr. Precious Simba, and we look forward to what you will be sharing with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dala. Thank you for that generous welcome. I think as academics, we forget how much technical jargon we use until you have to hear somebody else repeat it back to you. You're like, oh my gosh, is that what I actually do? But thank you. Greetings, friends, greetings, colleagues from all over the world. I was just watching the chats go up. There's people in their pajamas. There's people who are just waking up to their cup of coffee. There are people from Goma, from Zimbabwe, from Pakistan, from Nepal. It's truly an honor to speak to such a global audience. And I think I have the chair to thank for that. I present this talk. What I'm going to share with you is I'm in the Western Cape in South Africa. My location, you will see that I draw a lot from where I am. Part of my thinking is from the scholarship of the place where I am here in Southern Africa. So you will see quite a lot of that, the language, the examples, it will permeate through that, but I promise I will relate and interpret everything. I extend my deepest gratitude to Dala and the team, from the chair on Intercultural Competences at Stellenbosch for organizing the conversation. And I know there was quite a lot of work. So to collectively develop these ideas around intercultural competencies and to investigate and to allow the African voices to be integrated in this discourse. So well done to the team. Friends, there is no denying from where we stand that in many ways we find ourselves in a time of human and planetary crisis. And it's such a time marked by ecological degradation, social fragmentation, and indignity at scales that we have never seen before, and unimaginable scales. Reimagining how we encounter others, how we encounter each other, becomes an imperative, an urgent imperative. Today, I want to explore and to think through with you the isiZulu notion of sawubona, which literally means we see you, as an ethical and relational practice that is rooted in Ubuntu. I will examine how sawubona in Ubuntu practice can reshape intercultural dialogue, and not reshape, but perhaps offer new nuggets, offering a decolonial perspective that resist individualism, violence, and indignity. In a world framed by crisis, what does it mean truly to say we see one another? And how might Sawubona shape more ethical relational forms of intercultural engagement? So I invite us to reflect and ideate on some central questions. And the questions that I was sitting with is, in this crisis context that I'm referring to, what does it mean to truly see each other? That was the first question that I sit with. And how might Sawubona shape more ethical, relational, and perhaps more compassionate forms of intercultural engagement? I count this as an invitation to the intercultural competences community to engage with conceptual tools that perhaps are outside of the usual, outside of the ordinary, tools maybe from the global south, to reflect on these questions that are both urgent and globally pertinent. So to guide our reflections, I have structured our talk in three parts, and I hopefully will get through all of them. The first, I want us to explore the notion of crisis and its implications, perhaps, for intercultural dialogue. I won't go deeply into explaining the crisis that we face today, crises that we face today, but just to give us a sense of what crisis perhaps means conceptually, not only in just factual terms. And then next, I want to examine this notion of Sawubona as a relational ethic embedded within the philosophy of Ubuntu. And finally, we will consider the implications of this ethic for cultivating intercultural competences in these fractured times that we find ourselves in. So here we go. On the notion of crisis. Um, the notion of crisis has evolved over time, right? Historically, the term was associated with health. To be in crisis was to be in the state of, at the point where one can live and one can be unalive. It was this tipping point where anything is possible, right? Historically. So it was a critical moment in an illness when one can either recover or one can succumb to the illness. Today, the term has proliferated and across domains. When we speak about crisis, we sometimes speak about it in terms of problems, crisis in terms of things that we cannot deal with, crisis of leadership, crisis of economics, crisis of conscience, um, crisis of politics. So beyond the semantic evolution of the word, there is also an idea I wish to plant in our conversation and reflections that we will do together that will serve as maybe a conceptual hinge for us, which is the notion of crisis articulated by Vygotsky, where he talked about crisis as a transitional revolutionary period when the old and the previous concepts are hopelessly compromised and unfit for use, and adequate new concepts that can replace them have not yet been created. So he also played on this historical idea of crisis, of being at a moment of possibility. Um, but particularly where he talks about the previous concepts have been hopelessly compromised. And I believe we can all relate to this, in particular, in relation to this world where we are existing in, this fractured world we exist in, where it kind of feels like what we have tried is we are heading up again, we're banging against a wall. So this definition of crisis that we get from Vygotsky, then it captures this moment we find ourselves in. The fractures of our world reveal the inadequacy of inherited frameworks of intercultural engagement. That not inadequacy in terms that they are faulty, but inadequate in terms of perhaps overwhelmed by the level of fracture that we're having to deal with on a day-to-day, right? And Also, that we have not yet embraced new ways of relating. There is need for interjections, perhaps, in our day-to-day, in our everyday. Crisis in this sense is not merely an external condition, but a transitional and excruciating phase in which relational practices must be imagined. And as I was writing this, what came to mind is that moment in the New Zealand Parliament where, at the moment where a decision was being made that would have replayed history, there was an interjection of the haka, and that interjection formed created a crisis moment for everyone present and everyone around the world when we watched that moment. It created a possibility of new engagement, not only with the law that was about to be passed, but with the haka almost formed an interjection for us to relate differently. And I'm hoping that in our reflections today, this interjection that I offer of Sawubona will do exactly that, that it will interrupt our everyday and give us new possibilities. That this crisis, therefore, will not be in the sense of our collective demise, but will create new possibilities. The ones that Vygotsky was saying perhaps have not yet been created. From reflecting from the global south, as I said, the position where I am, it's not that these frameworks have not yet been created. They've been in existence for centuries. Perhaps it is we have not yet engaged with them before, and so they become new to us. And I'm happy to share and reflect with you from there. Part two. On Sawubona as a relational and ethical practice. The word Sawubona is such a beautiful word. It is found within the isiZulu language, but relatable across other languages, especially in Southern Africa. At first glance, it is just a greeting, a hello, hi. Um, it is a linguistic gesture of recognition. Sawubona, unjani. It's almost like, oh, hi, how are you? You know, it's like walking into a room and being pleasantly surprised that you are not alone in that room. Hi. That is Sawubona. It is such a gentle gesture of recognition. But if we unpack it more for its conceptual value, um, and beyond its lexicography and all of that, it is strange to say in a greeting as we interact with each other, it is important for the Bantu people to say we, even when we interact as just two people, the greeting is still the same, is we see you. And this will become very important later. So beyond its surface, as a social nicety, Sawubona embodies a profound social ethical orientation. The other. I like this quotation by a scholar, Kaunda. And Kaunda writes and says beautifully, I would have never written it in this way. Kaunda says, Sawubona is an invitation to the tabernacle of life as a form of vital participation in each other's presence. It creates freedom and vulnerability, as each Sawubona is a gift of the presence of life. Sawubona is a site of decolonial spirituality of grace. How beautiful is that? And of course, Kaunda here is taking a spiritual, according to their writing, a Pentecostality view of what Sawubona is. And of course, there are spiritual dimensions to it. To say we see you is to extend recognition or regard. Crucially, we have to keep in mind it is a we. It is a we see you, not an I see you. It is not an individual experience, but a communal invitation. The subject of seeing is collective. The act of seeing is relational. And so we can pull parallels there, and I will later, between, for example, Levinas's engagement with the face of the other, and how that individual experience is different from this Sawubona. This Sawubona is a collective. It is a bringing of the self and everything that the self represents into the moment of encountering the other. And so I not only encounter you as an individual who stands before you, who is precious, but I bring together everything that precious represents in that moment of encounter. I bring my people, I bring the places where I've been, I bring my rural home, my urban home, I bring my parents, my siblings into that encounter. And so it is quite profound to say Sawubona, because what I do next, I am saying I am engaging with you in the audience of community, of those that have come before me. And so I cannot just engage with you anyhow. I have to engage with you in the sacredness of the community that I bring, and also acknowledging the community that you bring into the encounter. And so it is, Kaunda is right. There is something quite spiritual about it, isn't there? The response to Sawubona is equally instructive. So when someone says Sawubona, we see you, the response is Sawubona in return. So we see you, and the response is we see you in return. So there is a reciprocity that signifies that visibility is not one-sided. It is not like a colonial gaze. Unlike these colonial encounters where the colonized is hyper visibilized, where the gaze is only unidirectional, hiding the acts of the colonizer and yet over visibilizing the colonized body, violently derobing, dehumanizing the one that is the object of seeing. Sawubona insists on mutual recognition. So as much as you are vulnerable, if someone has ever come into the room when you were unfortunately getting dressed, there is a vulnerability of being seen. But this vulnerability is not it's not one directional. This vulnerability is works in both sides. I see you. Ooh, I am vulnerable, but I see you in return. And so it is, it embodies what the South African philosopher Mokgobe Ramose says, describes as an ethical imperative of visibility. So this visibility, um, it sparks an ethical imperative. More than anything, this principle presents us with a way of seeing that removes forms of hierarchy in the way we see. It provides, as it were, another way of seeing, of ordering the world, where, for example, Levinas, um, for Levinas, the scholar, the emergence of the face of the other, um, of that who is outside of ourselves and yet recognizable to the self, for him, it first touches on fear and uncertainty before sparking compassion and an ethical responsibility to that person. The principle of Sawubona embraces the emergence of the other as an opportunity to transcend the self. So, in seeing you, there's an opportunity to become something more than I am as myself. That dimension is what is pointed to as being with or through others. And for many people who are in Southern Africa, we've heard this in the term of Ubuntu, which is often alliterated by the statement Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. A person is a person or becomes a person through or with other persons. So the emergence of another person is an opportunity for me to extend my humanity, to transcend what I can as an individual. So the principle of Sawubona embraces the emergence of the other as an opportunity to transcend. That dimension is pointed to by, as I say, being with or through others. If you want reminders of why our ways of seeing need to be challenged in this way, I would ask you to visit the work of Ken Gonzalez Day, for example, his work on erased lynching, where he takes away, he goes back into the archive of American history where black and brown bodies were lynched, right? And he takes away the lynched body and he forces us to engage with those who are in audience, right? And by taking away the victim, he forces us to engage in our own complicity in that moment, as it were. He invites us to see, what are we doing in watching this? Are we not part of the crowd? And so he challenges our way of seeing. Um, if you want to see why our ways of seeing need challenged, I would also invite you to the work of the South African artist Nandipha Mtambo, particularly her work on Ingabisa. The Ingabisa series, where she plays with taxidermy, this work with cowhide, and she makes these beautiful flowing figures that she molds from her and her mother's body. When you see one of those um, pieces, there is nothing that uh, out of our mind, you can fill in the gaps and you can see the beauty, the grandeur in the dresses and all of that. And yet, at the end of it, it's just cowhide. It is not a dress, it is not an outfit, they are not socks, it is cowhide. But by the way she makes the art, she challenges our way of seeing. Yeah. Um, so our ways of seeing have been challenged um, in this day that we find ourselves in this fractured moment that I spoke of, this moment of crisis, when horror is scrollable, when it is interjected by hyper consumerism of Temu or any other such adverts, where seeing is mediated electronically and controlled by a flick of a finger. We see, but can choose not to see. We see and can choose to refuse to be seen ourselves. We can see and refuse to be touched. In half a second, we have scrolled past that image of Goma, of guns and children with their livelihoods on their heads. In half a second, we can scroll past that. We can scroll past that United Nations video with the children of Gaza. Phew, half a second, it's gone. We have landed on to the next one, a viral dance video, just in time to remain untouched by the horrors of death that happens in real time. We can choose not to see, and this is the world that we live in. So this principle of reciprocal recognition is one that is built in and resonates across the Bantu linguistic landscape. We cannot see without allowing ourselves to be seen. And like the work of Gonzalez Day illustrates, to see is to be implicated in what we are seeing. Let me just check on the time. I was going to share some examples from another linguistic repertoire that I have in Shona, for example, where to see, for example, when we greet and people say, "How are you, Makadim?" The perfect response is, "Takasimba kana makasimbao." We are well only if you are well. How beautiful is that? I am well only if you are well. Again, the response is a we. It is never an individual I. So there's this idea of bringing communities in the moment of encounter. And it forces us to think, what communities do we bring in our encounters? Who do we stand with? What I wanted to show here is that Sawubona is not only a language in the lexicographic naming of things. It is a conceptual thinking that runs across Bantu existences. And
Dr. Simba, it seems you might have frozen. So we'll give it a moment to hopefully come back.
The other as an event marked by transcendence, by death and responsibility. While he often describes his encounter as fraught, even death-laden, Sawubona offers a contrasting epistemology. From an Ubuntu perspective, the encounter with the other is not primarily an encounter with alterity as threat. And I want us to hold on to this. To the encounter with alterity as threat. But for Sawubona, it is an encounter with relational potential. So think about it when we encounter the images that we so quickly want to move past. I saw somebody who said they're from Goma there. Welcome. What does that mean? It is not a threat. It is a potential, a relational potential. What does it mean to be in relationship with the children of Gaza, with the women of Gaza, with the women in Goma? What does it mean to be in relationship with them? What does it mean for us to say, we see you? What does that say when we are implicated in that seeing and they say, we see you too? What do they see? Interesting. I thought about that. And so for Ubuntu, the other is not in a site of fear, but a site of becoming. The self is always in a state of relational co-emergence with others, right? I see I have about 5 minutes. I'll move on to part 3. So what does this mean for intercultural competences in fractured times? Well, I have about 4 things that it could mean for us as a community, as practitioners. Number 1, Sawubona can offer intercultural competencies new ways of seeing. I've already expanded on this. Sawubona is part of Ubuntu practice as a reciprocal way of seeing and being seen, of being aware, of being, and I use being here in the way that Ramose uses it as a hyphenated term, of being in the world, of presencing. So it's not only just seeing, but also our own presencing in the world. So new ways of seeing. How are we presencing? How are we witness? As much as the work of Gonzalez Day, he wants to highlight those who were present in the lynching. How could you be present in such a time? And I think if we allow ourselves, I believe, to say in this moment, we want new ways of seeing, we have to acknowledge that we are implicating ourselves. We are implicated in the horrors of our time. We are audience to it, right? So as much as we are seeing, we are being seen by this moment. We are implicated in it. And there will come a time in history where we need to account for it. Where were we when these things happened? New ways of seeing. What a responsibility. The second implication is on ethical presence. Intercultural competences must go beyond cognitive and technical skills to cultivate an ethical presence characterized by mutual visibility and recognition. Sawubona reminds us that to see another is to enter into a relationship that requires care, accountability, and responsiveness. So to witness, a few weeks, I think months now, I was at a talk here at Stellenbosch University where we were asked, what does it mean to bear witness? To be witness is to be implicated in the moment and to be ethically present. I think that's the second implication. The third implication is decolonial orientation. The concept of Sawubona foregrounds ways of relating rooted in Southern epistemologies. For ICC to be relevant in post-colonial contexts, and I believe even going forwards globally, it must engage with practices like Sawubona that resist extractive, hierarchical, and individualistic frameworks. We must engage with ways of seeing each other that remove these hierarchies of existence. And lastly, relational resilience. Like I said, in one other language, when we are asked, how are you in greeting? The response is, we are here. Tiripo, we are present. Can you believe that? I think there is relational resilience that we need to have in these times, especially as we reach out to communities that are under attack, that are under unimaginable um, stresses and moments of crisis. And these can be in the global north, east, or even in the south. Sometimes it helps to just say, we are here, to have that relational resilience. In fractured times, relationships themselves become sites of resilience. Sawubona challenge for one another's vulnerabilities, even when historical, cultural, and ideological differences surface. I'm left about a minute and 30 seconds. I will conclude. In conclusion, in a world where crises multiply and relational fractures deepen, Sabona offers a practice of hope, we can say. It invites us to move beyond mere tolerance towards a more profound reciprocal engagement with others. As we continue this dialogue within the ICC community, let us ask what it would mean in practice to structure our intercultural engagements around this ethic of mutual recognition. I would like to read an extraction from um, a book by Donna Haraway on making kin. And she says this: the task is to become capable with each other in all of our bumptious kinds of response. Mixed up times are overflowing with both pain and joy, with vastly unjust patterns of pain and joy, with unnecessary killing of ongoingness, but also with the necessary resurgence. The task is to make kin in lines of inventive connection as a practice of learning to live and die well with each other in a thick present. Our task is to make trouble, to stir up potent response to devastating events, as well as to settle troubled waters and rebuild quiet places. So perhaps in light of this, the path to peace, to intercultural connection, competences, dialogues, begins with a simple yet radical gesture of seeing each other. We see you, someone. Thank you. I think I'll end there. My alarm just went off.
Thank you so much, Dr. Precious Simba. And you're already getting some questions in the chat, and we invite others to put questions in the chat for you as well. And some of the questions that have come up is this we principle can sometimes be intimidating. And what is your take on that? And then another question is, what are other similar concepts to what you're describing beyond the Bantu peoples on this?
Okay. Maybe I'll take those two first. I do agree. This we concept is very, very intimidating because it puts a lot of pressure on us. It's like if you try and remember, I can't remember who wrote this, but saying that one of the loudest voices that they've carried with them in their life is their mother's voice. Can you imagine living through life, encountering and doing things, and having your mother's voice with you? But perhaps I think this I use it in this place as a form of accountability in our encounters, that we cannot be in our actions just act out anyhow. We have a responsibility not only in the present, but in the moment beyond the present, beyond to the communities that we bring along with ourselves. And this is certainly a very African principle, where when someone acts in a very ethical manner, the first point of praise is not to the one who enacts the ethics. The first point of praise is the people that you come from, because you are representative of that. So I think it's a very African traditional principle that recognizes community even in individual acts. And then other similar concepts beyond the Bantu, I think they must be countless, but I can speak confidently from the Abantu experiences, as these are part of my research and the ones that I know intimately well. I would invite, even in the chat, from what I was saying, are they relatable across the globe? Concepts that we can put together, even just terms. It will be very interesting to see how these terms relate to one another from different places. I would very much be interested in something like that, because also that become a point for us to dialogue and connect and see each other. So yeah, I cannot speak confidently to what are the related concepts, but I can say I think I invite everybody who's present to share from the talk, are there concepts from your own experience? Even from Southern Africa, I think there is countless more that we can share and connect to the concept of sawubona, of seeing the other. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Another question for you is, what suggestions do you have for helping people who come from more of the I culture to see the we and be willing to be accountable as part of a we?
Um, I think the transition for me comes from the willingness to learn. Like the concept that the quotation that I shared from Vygotsky, saying perhaps this individual approach to life has not served us well. Are there other things that we can engage with? That is a very vulnerable question to bring even to the self, to say, what else can I use in terms of tools to navigate this life? So number one, it's an openness to learn, to understand. Number two, it's an openness to say, I may not know, but I'm willing to be guided. It's important, if we are engaging with concepts from the South, having voices from the South, for example, speak for themselves and to show us the path. I shared that example from the New Zealand Parliament. For me, what was powerful about that moment, that interjection, it was a look at this again. Can And I think the response there was not just, you know, but to participate in that pause and to be open to be part of a new process that challenges maybe the way things have always been done. And that takes vulnerability, I think, and openness to be able to do that. I see there's somebody who's saying there is a lovely German word. I'm just going to write that down.
Yes,
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Gemeinsen is being, and then we're several others put in chat around Salam Alaikum. In Northern Africa is the greeting of may peace be with you, and the response is, and may peace be with you. However, the you is also collective.
Wow. I did not know that. I did not know that. Oh wow. I did not know that the response is collective. Interesting. Very
Yes,
interesting.
and thank you
Yes.
to others who are sharing those different concepts here. Another question for you is, how is Sawubona practiced among the different political groups in South Africa, or is this a huge challenge for the groups?
I'm not sure what they mean by political groups. They mean like political art institutions or different nations in Southern Africa, or in South Africa. I do know that So the people of South Africa, just much like a lot of other groupings in Southern Africa, we congregate around languages. So you will have people who speak isiXhosa, you will have Xhosa nations, right? I think there are about 2 or 3 different nations within Xhosa speaking groups. People who speak Sesotho, we have a Sotho nation that congregates around the language. So the language becomes a very important tool in terms of a cultural artifact, but in terms of their epistemology as a people. That said, the word Sawubona is distinctly Zulu. It's in the isiZulu language. But if you go through all of these different linguistic nation groupings, you will find similar terms and concepts of seeing and engaging and relating. I shared, for example, the isiZulu term, the Shona term. If we had time, we could have engaged with Sesotho people, Tswana people, Venda people. We would have shared with Chichewa people of Malawi. They also have unique terms like that. So these tools are there in different linguistic nations. I hope I answered that question.
And yeah, and Dr. Kelly Thomas clarified that she meant political parties and
Oh, political parties.
how is that
Um,
related to political parties getting
Political parties. Well, the Sawubona concept, I have not seen much or heard political parties use as much, but I have seen the concept of Ubuntu itself being used by different political parties, particularly those who are part of the Black movement. They use the concept quite a lot. There is critique that the concept has been over politicized, for example, where you get people using Ubuntu when it benefits them, but where there is a requirement of political leaders to um, let go of their own benefits for the benefit of people. Ubuntu does not feature anywhere there. So the critique is there. Ubuntu is not a concept that is without its own problems. And I think it's highly necessary for us to critique its use, its evolution over time across different regions. I was sharing the other day my own study when I did my PhD. My own study, the title was A Feminist Critique of Ubuntu. So I engaged with Ubuntu, but from a very critical point of contact. So I don't think that invalidates Ubuntu, but it just gives us more tools to engage with it and expand it, and make it more relevant to contemporary society.
So others are sharing that in Kenya, there's a cousin of this word, Harambe, which is also about
Yes.
interconnectedness. And several other questions for you. Let me go ahead and just share them here. What is your experience on introducing or trying to explain we concepts and worldviews to highly individualistic or competitive individuals, fields, or sectors? That's one question. The second question is, what are your thoughts on the significance of Sawubona in today's world, especially among the youth coming up in our age of AI? And the third question is, yeah, it looks like it's coming back to this. How do you think individualistic cultures can relate or apply this
Mm,
worldview, this way of seeing the world and relating to each other?
mm, mm. Um, so on the question of bringing this we approach in an individualistic, um, let me not call it an individualistic environment, but maybe an environment that is not framed by Ubuntu principles. I currently teach here at Stellenbosch University, and my current obsession is how do I teach Ubuntu? Because a lot of my students here come from cultures outside of Ubuntu cultures. So they might hear, they've heard being a lot of them being South Africans who've grown up in South Africa, they've heard the word Ubuntu, Ubuntu here, Ubuntu there. But in terms of how do we engage with it, how do we teach it, that is one of the biggest concepts, problems that I'm engaged in right now in terms of research. And where I've been led, of course, there are pedagogical tools that we can cultivate, and I've tried to do that. But where I'm seeing as the gap that we need to bring in, we need to bring the voice of the African mother. Because for a lot of people who first learn Ubuntu, it's in the household, um, at your mother, next to your mother. There's a reason why it's called your mother's tongue. That is first where we learned um, these gestures of the we, these gestures of kinship, of responsibility and accountability to the we. That's where we first, and I think that voice needs to be elevated in education. A lot of the times, learners come into school, and I'm looking at a kindergarten level. They come into school already with very deeply complex language repertoires. And I don't think we have given enough due respect to the education that happens at home. Without pie charts, without songs, without all of that, still children are able to learn. And so we need to go back to that relationship with the mother, particularly the African mother in the concept of Ubuntu, to understand what are the tools do they use, what stories, what songs, what kind of pedagogical repertoires do they have that reach the. I think that's the gap I'm seeing right now. So I don't have the full answer of how you bring the we in a context where the students or the people on the receiving end have not come from a culture like that. I have tried to develop some tools, but I'm also seeing that my tools still need more input, and I need to go into that empirical dimension and get that feedback and learn from the African mothers how they do it. Um, and then there's a question on Sawubona in today's world, especially this technologically mediated world. I can agree. I think there is a big gap. Um, there's something about technology that is so isolating, while at the same time making hyper visible the world that you're engaging in through the device. So perhaps we need to develop digital tools of Ubuntu. Perhaps that's something that someone can latch onto. Um, Digital tools of Ubuntu. Funny enough, there is a software called Ubuntu, and um, it's open source, and people can, remake it in multiple ways. I haven't seen any studies on how it promotes connectivity, um, but certainly if you're into technology and you want to talk about that, I think reach out to us. That would be an interesting dimension to thinking about intercultural competences in a digital world, bringing thinking through Ubuntu. I think it sounds like a conference presentation, but yeah.
I was
Uh,
just going to say that, absolutely, and we really appreciate the questions that we've received, because this really helps highlight areas of further research for this UNESCO chair, for Dr. Simba as a co-chair. We really appreciate all the questions. We tried to answer as many as we could. There are some asking for resources, particularly those who don't have African mothers to learn from. And
okay.
and also ways to look at kind of the role of African fathers, and we can think some more about this and the extent of
Yes.
Sawubona and how it's related to
Yes.
empathy, and also
Yes.
quite a bit of what you were describing about a willingness to learn and understand and be willing to be guided. That has a lot to do with cultural humility, and there's been quite a bit of work and research around that as well. So that's something we can continue to unpack further, and we invite all of you to continue to join the work of our UNESCO chair in looking at all these different concepts. The reason this UNESCO chair is hosted at Stellenbosch University in South Africa is to be able to bring greater awareness and to elevate these vital perspectives that are currently missing in a lot of the discourse on intercultural competence, which has largely come out of the global north, in Europe and in North America. So this chair is about looking at how can we truly begin to understand and unpack a lot of these other key concepts around intercultural competence from African perspectives, which again, we invite you to our upcoming conference in Morocco. We invite you to future webinars. These are going to be monthly, where you will get to hear many different perspectives around this, starting next month in March 26th with John Linus from Kenya, sharing youth perspectives on intercultural competence and what's necessary for us to get along together. We want to especially thank Dr. Simba for kicking off this webinar series. So thank you so much for providing such rich food for thought. So many notes, and I've seen so many comments in the chat about how this was just so inspirational and insightful and enlightening. And we hope that many of you will be able to take what you've learned today and bring it forward into your own work. And this kind of work, all of what we're talking about, is needed now more than ever, given the increasing divides that we often find in our world today. We want to thank the core team of this UNESCO chair for all of their behind the scenes work in making this happen, particularly Werner Witt and Rabia Aber Omar and Yansiwi Muisa. We also want to say a special thank you to Stellenbosch University for supporting this UNESCO chair at Stellenbosch. And we want to thank the UNESCO National Commission of South Africa. I understand that several members of that commission were able to join us today, and we are very grateful for your continued support. And we again invite you to reach out to us. You have our contact information. You see that here. And then also join us again for upcoming events of this UNESCO chair or our partner, one of our partners, the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next month for our second installment in this webinar series. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so